Welcome back to this special conversation with Mr. Jayant Sinha, the Minister of State for Finance. Just a word more on capitalization. You know, I did the numbers along with all the analyst reports that were helping me. It was about 2 lakh crore that people were expecting up and over the next 4 years in terms of capital, assuming 13 to 14% credit growth. But if the banks were to grow at 8 or 9%, which is the current loan growth, then you need far lesser capital. I mean, you can even make...
That's why I'm saying, Lata, I'm a spreadsheet jockey. I can run spreadsheets. I can run spreadsheets with the best of the analysts. Okay, so let me tell you, when we did Indradhanush, we said that the number was 1.8 lakh crores, assuming system-wide credit growth of 12%.
Okay.
That's what we had said then. And on that 1.8 lakh crores, of which we said government would provide 70,000 crores, 25, 25, 20, and then we would expect to be able to raise from the market 1.1 lakh crores. So those were the numbers we had put out in August 2015. Yes. Now, obviously, depending on what you assume for credit growth, you can assume more numbers, less numbers, gross NPAs,
but
worst case.
But okay with the lower credit growth is all I'm asking.
No, it's not a question of we are okay or not okay. It's really a question of what is required in the marketplace right now. As of right now, what we are seeing in the marketplace is fairly robust credit growth when it comes to retail.
Yes.
And small and medium businesses, to an extent for working capital. But for a variety of very good reasons, project finance is not growing as much as it should. And therefore, credit growth is not at the levels that it has been. And the credit growth levels we're seeing is perfectly consistent with what you would expect with an economy where there's not a lot of project finance happening.
Consolidation. What's the map? Should we be able to see some consolidation of the non-SBI babies, non-SBI group in FY17 itself?
Well, again, as far as consolidation is concerned, you have to really ask yourself what the objective is. Right? We really need in India, along with our very excellent private sector banks, we need a few global scale banks in India, which are really large and capable of providing the most sophisticated financial services as well as the best technologies. So we need a few of those banks. And then, as there are around the world, we need differentiated financial institutions.
May I interrupt? I know this like the back of my hand because I've heard you on this issue, and I've heard even the finance minister on this issue. My point is, I assume I'm a Bank of Baroda investor. That is best in class in the non-SBI category in public sector banks. That investor is worried that will you tie me up with an IOB? Will you tie me up with a United Bank?
All investors in public sector banks should be very reassured. With respect to the question of consolidation, are these consolidations going to be, as they call them, shotgun marriages where you just force people together? Absolutely not. We've said that the goal is competitiveness. If you are going to get into a shotgun marriage where there is no synergy, where there's no complementarity, and where there's no value creation, why would you want to do the merger? In any case, we are the primary shareholder.
Yes.
But it has to be a process that has to be driven by the boards. The boards have to look at what the strategies for their various banks are, which strategies are going to create value, whether it is a consolidation strategy or a differentiation strategy, and then accordingly choose strategies that are going to create value for all stakeholders. I've been in business for a long time, right? I know what it means to do value creating consolidations and mergers. I've done many of them myself. So you can rest assured that we will do what is in the best interest of all stakeholders.
MPC, when is the Monetary Policy Committee members likely to be announced?
A selection committee is being constituted for that, and as soon as the selection committee is constituted for it, they will of course go through and select the 3 government nominees for that.
Okay, we should know that in a month?
I can't give a timeline on that because the selection committee has not yet been constituted. As soon as that's constituted, they work through the calendars, they get nominations. You see, part of what has to happen, and this is the reason why, of course, the NIF selection has taken time, is because these are very important appointments, first of all. Second of all, we want to make sure that we give a fair opportunity to everybody around the world for these very important positions. So in NIF, obviously we invited, we then advertised around the world, we got a very good slate of candidates, and that whole process of working through that, and I can tell you in the private sector also that if you have to do a CEO search, it can take 6 to 8 months. So in the same way, yes, the selection committee will be constituted very soon, but of course we'll advertise, globally for that. We'll want world-class, eminent experts on that, and so that process may take some time.
So selection committee should be at least appointed in a month?
Yes, that can be done very quickly.
Okay. NIIF, actually, it's 2 years since you announced the constitution of that fund.
No,
And-
that's not right. We announced NIF in the budget last year. So it was in February
Okay,
2015.
fine. 15 months.
That's we did that. And of course, a lot has happened as far as NIF is concerned. We are almost at the point of announcing.
You said that in end Jan. You said that in early Feb to Shireen.
No. I said that we have already got a very, very good
Yes,
group
you
of
said that.
candidates. Then, of course, we had to go through the interview process. We had to go through getting approvals and so on. And so now we have almost announcing the final candidate who is going to be the head of NIF. But in the meanwhile, there's a lot of other work that's also been happening because, of course, we have been in discussions with investors. And so there are 2 or 3 funds that are going to get started relatively soon.
There will be stressed asset funds?
There will be a stressed assets fund, there'll be a greenfield assets fund, there'll be a renewable fund. All of those are moving. There'll be also one on manufacturing. So all of those are moving along very quickly.
What's the
We've got
size of the
MOUs.
stressed asset fund?
No, the stressed assets fund, we are hoping that we'll do a first close of 10,000 crores. And then once we've done a first close of 10,000 crores, that we will then do a second close and really try and build that up. But I think the stressed assets fund is going to be very important.
Needed now.
Very important as we deal with the NPA issue.
Okay, so connected to that, the government was looking at a panel which will be kind of vetting the stressed asset sales by banks. Exactly what will be the role of that panel?
So that is under consideration right now.
But there is going to be a panel.
It is under consideration right now, and we have to separate out process integrity from the commercial decision making. So what we think the panel can do is to actually ensure process integrity. It's a transparent process with all the necessary analytics and everything else. So we can ensure the integrity of that. But the commercial decision obviously is the domain, the prerogative of the bankers themselves, which they routinely do in any case. And so they should continue to make their commercial decisions.
So when does this panel come up?
It's all imminent. We are just in the process of working through all
So
of that.
within a week or so we should know.
We should very shortly.
Okay,
Very
but
shortly.
I have a philosophical problem with all this. I mean, I thought when the Bank Boards Bureau was set up and when the PJ Naik recommendations came in, you will actually strengthen the boards of the individual banks. If the boards of the individual banks stood and said, I think that this stressed asset sale has gone through the process, isn't that a better process? Now the way you are going, the Bank Board Bureau appoints everybody, another panel will vet the process. Then why do we have boards for banks? They have no power to do anything.
No, that is always an over-dramatization, which you all love to do in the media. That's not correct. As I said earlier, the boards play a very important role, will continue to play an extraordinarily important role. The governance is crucial to the functioning of these banks. As I said, our first step was to actually strengthen governance and management. Commercial decision-making for the boards will, of course, be done, for these situations will be done by the boards. But because this is an unprecedented situation, the level of haircuts that have to be done for these assets, the speed at which they have to be done is unprecedented. And for that, we want to make sure that from a process point of view, the manner in which this is done, everybody comes out of it feeling comfortable that, yes, it's a validated process. It's a process that's not going to run afoul of the CVC, CAG, etc., etc., etc. It's public money after all. So we just want to make sure that that is validated because of the speed and the scale at which we are doing it. Obviously, the commercial decision making has to stay with the boards.
No, I take your point. We are, I guess, in extraordinary times when it comes to stressed assets. But primarily because of, this extraordinary stressed asset situation that we are in, I have a complaint with the finance ministry. You know, you are the MIBUP for the public sector banks, so to speak. You are their shareholder or the government representative of their shareholder. Now, you look at the way Uday scheme has panned out. 75% of the loans owed by the DISCOMs become state government loans. Very good. As a shareholder, you should be very happy with that process because a stronger owner is taking charge. But for the remaining 25%, you know, they are marked as NPAs because they are restructuring, they are restructuring. They should logically be marked as NPAs. When I read the Uday press release, it says that that 25% should be converted into DISCOM bonds at an interest rate equal to the base rate. Now, this is not fair. It should be a market rate, and the market will not give it 9.3%. The market will give it probably, a yield of 11 or 12 because these are basically entities whose expenditure is higher than their income. Is it not unfair that somebody sets the price of that, the yield of that bond? Why is it not market discovered? And you are not even coming to the rescue of the public sector banks.
Of course, we are backstopping the entire system, Lata. So whether it is the DISCOMs, which are also obviously owned by the state governments, or the public sector banks, ultimately the debt of all of these entities is backstopped by the government of India, by the sovereign, because you have to remember...
the DISCOM bonds will be guaranteed by you?
No. I'm not saying necessarily the DISCOM bonds, but to the extent that the DISCOMs themselves are owned by the state governments, and you know that issuance of any state debt by the Constitution ultimately has to be validated and endorsed by the federal government, the central government as well. And therefore, in all of this, obviously, we have to make trade-offs across all these different entities where all these are ultimately backstopped by the central government, and this reflects some of the trade-offs we've had to make.
They have to set aside provisioning for, every bank announces in its notes to accounts that this much is for the DISCOM bonds, and they have had to provide for it. The Punjab State, FCI, TUSL, again, they have had to provide for it. To say that all this is sovereign debt and ultimately it's backstopped doesn't really solve the problem for the banks. NAFED, government-owned, is a willful defaulter for PNB. It doesn't solve PNB's problem when you say, ultimately it's a government organization. You're not making life easier for the PSU banks, in spite of the fact that you are the mother ministry for them.
No, you've jumped to a conclusion where you've said that they are a willful defaulter.
No, it was declared in the PNB list. I'm just quoting facts.
Okay, so they have obviously an NPA issue there, and that's being sorted out as well. But ultimately, you have to recognize that as far as government is concerned, government has to make sure that all the different entities are viable and sustainable. And in that sense, we have to backstop not just the public sector banks, we have to in some ways backstop the state governments, and we have to backstop all of the government entities like FCI and the DISCOMs as well. So, and therefore it means it really is up to the taxpayers to do all of that. And so in doing so, in ensuring that the entire system and looking at it at a systemic level is working properly, we have to, of course, make certain trade-offs.
Okay, fine. I'll take it at that. I'm also being told that we are running out of time, so I'm going to ask you the last and perhaps the most important question. Several charges were made against the RBI governor yesterday by a member of your party. Do you endorse them, agree with them?
This is a democracy, and in a democracy, many people express many views.
No, like a leader of your party. It's not anybody. One would look at him as a spokesman of your party. Is that the voice of the party speaking?
There are, in a democracy, many views and many perspectives, and I think we should be willing to listen to all perspectives when it comes to these matters. Of course, as you also know, there are many voices that have expressed a great deal of support for the policies followed by the Reserve Bank of India. There are other voices that are critical of some of those policies, as you have been of the Ministry of Finance right now. So obviously in a democracy, we have various shades of opinion and various perspectives and views, and that's very healthy for a democracy.
Well, I'm not sure whether such kind of name-calling is healthy at all. And the government not even distancing itself from those comments. Should we take them as official government comments?
My understanding is this was a comment made by a Rajya Sabha member.
So they are not official government comments?
Rajya Sabha members are not necessarily members of the government.
Okay, well, then let me ask you spot on. What are the chances that the governor will be continued? We did a poll, and maybe about 50 people, bond dealers, economists, CFOs, bankers, and it was 100 out of 100 asking for his continuation. Is there a chance he will be continued? The market seems to want.
As Honorable Finance Minister said, these are not issues that are discussed in the media. We have a very mature, collaborative, institutional relationship with the Reserve Bank of India, and we look forward to strengthening and building on that relationship.
When do we get to know at least the decision of the government?
As I said earlier, Lata, these are not issues that are discussed in the media.
Even the timeline, I'm not asking you who.
No, as I said, these are issues that are not discussed in the media.
All right.
You'll know soon enough.
Soon enough?
At the appropriate time.
I'll catch on to soon enough rather than appropriate time. Mr. Sinha, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
For sparing time for us.